The Preacher's Wife and Hunt for Red October are just a couple of the movies that we've seen him on the big screen. Law and Order, Criminal Intent, he became, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, a very familiar face there. And he, with his better half, and I mean that in all ways, because I know Angela Bassett, but he and his wife will be making stints on the final year of ER, which really says a lot because they wanted to bring in not only big guns, but they wanted to bring in, I know because I've talked to some people, some serious actors for that last year, and what a show has been a perennial favorite. And of course we saw him in Tuskegee Airmen, but I would encourage many of you to go see or go buy a book that he and his wife co-authored called Friends, A Love Story. We were just talking about the importance of the bond between husband and wife that isn't often really dealt with in a way it should be, and they dealt with it beautifully. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Courtney B. Vance. Another good friend of mine, a familiar face to those of you who watch the punditry that is going on far too often, and I admit I'm a part of that too, with MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. We're all acting like we know what is about to happen. We know what we hope is going to happen, but we don't know what's about to happen. But we'll get into that because that's one of the things I want to talk about, building memories. And one of the memories, let me do it in case I forget, that you can build with your daughter is as a father. Take her to vote. On November 4th. Go take her to vote. If she's of age, go together, and if she's little, imagine what you'll be able to say, or imagine what she'll remember is, Daddy and I voted for, and I'm going to take my journalist hat off, the first African-American president ever elected. So imagine the memories we can build. But Walter's been on the forefront of making sure that we are so well informed. He's an attorney out of the New York area. And one of the things, he's the founder of the NorthstarNewsTV.com website that is recently released and launched. And I would tell you, if you want to be informed, this is a fascinating website that Walter's been working on for many, many years, but it is launched. And it is educational, informative, but also intriguing in the way that they've done it. And I encourage all of you all to go on NorthstarNewsTV.com. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but let us welcome Walter Fields. All right, gentlemen, as we wait for Ms. Austin, let me, so people will understand the background in terms of the lovely young ladies in your lives, I'll go down the line. Greg, give us a sense of the bundles of love and pink that are in your life, if you will.
Yeah, let me say first that I had my first child prior to marriage and ultimately had to visit with her at her mother's home, and I'd pick her up when she was 3, 5, 7, and take her to the movies, take her wherever I could so we can establish that bond. Some few years later, my child was born, my other daughter was born by way of marriage. It was a planned pregnancy. And some of the fondest memories I have, and I attribute a lot of our bonding to this, is when we go to the daddy-daughter dance. I could never forget. Every year we'd go there in the middle school that she attended. So that established a great bond. And I began, as I believe is the duty of a father, to advise, inform, and counsel her as she, even though she would run away and go up to her room and say, Daddy, can I just go and do my homework and call my friends? Every now and then I would have to catch her on the way upstairs. And just, she's in college now. She's a senior and headed toward medical school. And just recently, I mean, as recent as the last couple of weeks, about a month ago, no, I'm sorry, about 3 months ago, she started dating a guy, pretty boy type, up at college. Like every pretty boy type like that.
We're supposed to be boys, man.
And so I came to her, I just gave it to her raw. I said, look here. I said, I want you to keep one thing in mind. Most of those boys up at college, or young men up at college, they want to hit it and quit it. I said, that's what college young men want to do for the most part. And I said, so I'd like to see you, and I think you should date this young man for quite some time, get to know him. You all get to enjoy each other's company before you make that commitment. And so As it would be, 2 months later, she brings me a copy of his record, his criminal record, to be expunged. And before you say, inside, I was glad to do it because I was in that same position as a young man. And so I helped him. And afterwards, she came to me and said, well, Dad, they repossessed his car. I said, okay. I said, well, shouldn't he be getting a job? She said, well, he can't get a job because of his record. And so it was such a familiar story for many black men, and many of you ladies know that so many of our black men who are undereducated and unprepared for the workforce and indeed incarcerated and have something on their record, they do have a hard time. So I was a little sympathetic there. Although I didn't give him any money to buy a car, I did tell her, I said, well, if he needs a ride to work, you can give him that. And next thing I knew, he needed a suit to wear to work for his application. I said, well, honey, this is where it stops. And as fate would have it, my oldest son, who just started University of Michigan, and she was at Michigan State, and so was the guy, he went to visit a young lady who stayed right next door to my son, coincidentally. And they weren't just visiting to read the Bible. He was indeed courting another woman at the other university. And so she came back and said, Dad, you were right. I'm glad you told me to hold off, because I would have sent some of your boys from the old days to see him had I did anything. So once again, I think it's important that we step into the role of advisor, as counselor, and as director in our child's lives, particularly our young ladies' lives, as much as they'll allow us. Lastly, I'll say one of the most endearing memories as well, even though most of you wouldn't think it's endearing. We'd go to the state fair every year, my children and I and family, and it would be a real pleasant time. We'd all be together and get into popcorn and ride on the rides together. So she turned 14. And so we were going to the state fair again and all together, and suddenly she said, well, I'll check with you guys in about a couple of hours. Call me when you're ready to leave. And I'm going to check with some friends of mine who are also here. So she walked in, kind of stunned. I said, okay. Well, I was even more stunned about an hour later when we saw her and her friends gathered around the hot dog stand or whatever it was, and went over just to say hi, and she took off running at high speed and later told us, I'm embarrassed to be around you. I said, well, I'm on television. I'm this. She said, Daddy, I don't watch your show, number one. Neither do my friends. And that means nothing to me or them. I am still embarrassed of you. And please, if you can restrain yourself from coming around, I would appreciate it. So that's another experience that you're going to deal with in about.
Well and good, but the biggest problem is teenage pregnancy and all these single mothers. And Roland Martin was on the panel. Roland and I beat each other to the punch in the sense of what Greg suggested. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. But if more men were involved in their daughters' lives, we would not see the same number of teenage pregnancies that we see. And so these kinds of things, when people say, oh, it's just about fathers and daughters, no, it's not, because that rolls over and affects the entire family. It'll stop a young lady or a young man in his tracks in terms of what he'll be able to do for his future. So this is far greater than just, what some people do. Why y'all doing father, daughter dance? That's nice. No, it's much, much deeper. So let us turn our attention to Courtney B. Vance, who has a lovely young lady who has taken his heart. And as you say, we're just going to watch you, Mr. Vance, as she grows, and you can join the club, my brother.
Well, I guess that's the segue. Thank you for my segue, Mr. Greg. But Miss Bronwyn is her name, Bronwyn Golden. Sweetest little thing, 2.5. But one of the most important things for me and my wife, Miss Angela. Angela's sister, stepsister, took us aside. I'll pause while the Queen comes up onto the dais. Miss Patty Austin.
Ladies and gentlemen, before Courtney goes, I told you that we would, in fact, give her a proper introduction. We want to thank her for battling that 14th Street Bridge traffic and the like. But those of us who love music, and many of you who don't necessarily have a great collection, have heard this voice in many, many commercial jingles over the years. But those of us who love music know that she is one of the definitive voices of our generation. And I don't throw that around loosely. She is that, whether it's with her solo efforts, End of the Rainbow, Havana Candy, which Walter and I said got many of us through schools and some lonely nights and the like, or whether it's her collaborations with the wonderful Quincy Jones, or duets with James Ingram or Peabo Bryson. She has clearly been one that has set the stage musically for many of us. We'd like you to properly welcome Miss Patty Austin. So, Patty, we're going to come down to you in just a moment. We've been going down the line just to hear the stories of personally what the relationship between father and daughter are here. So, Courtney, pick up, please.
My wife and I are new parents, so we've got a lot to learn. So it's wonderful for us to be here and for me to be here and to listen. But one of the most important things that was told us was told by Angela's sister, who took us when we went to visit. Angela took me to visit her and her husband early on. Actually, when we were engaged, they sat us down, and Lynn is her sister's name. Took us aside as Lynn and her husband were sitting across from us, Angela and I, in the living room, and she said, "Courtney, Angela, this is my husband. I love my children, but this is my husband. The children wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my husband." As y'all go on, just know that it's about the two of you. You two have to set up camp and make sure that you are strong. And that's one of the strongest things for me. And I say to Angela oftentimes is that, and in front of the children, that the mommy, and we all have to listen to mommy. So just get in line. I know you don't want to listen sometimes, but mommy said we got to do this, we got to do it. And that, the lessons that we're talking about in terms of the children, we all have those stories, but one of the most important things for me is the relationship between my wife and I, that we're on the same page in regard to what's happening with the twins. Because if we ain't on the same page, they sense that we're not on the same page, and they split us like knife through butter. I'm like, Andrew, do you just see what no. So we go back to the room, and we just get our little selves together, come back out, and say, okay, now this is what we're going to do. So that's, your questions will pinpoint, and I'll get into more about the babies and the father-daughter, but I just wanted to throw that in.
And so very important. I told Courtney that for me, when you talk about that, I read that in their book, and it just hit me, because too often we talk about children, and those of us who are parents really go overboard often for them, but we forget that the person who really, to your left or right at the time, that's going to be there when, as Greg said, they start running away and doing all of that, is the spouse or the partner that you have. So we'll get into that. Let me just say, for the people who are working in, if you walk quietly, those of you standing just along here, there are some seats that can be filled in here, so you won't have to stand throughout the session. All right, Walter, we'd like you to quickly not only talk about your daughter, but one of the reasons we asked you on this panel is not only for your legal expertise that I'm going to get into in a minute, but you had a very interesting story about your own father and your daughter as relates to how your sisters were raised.
And I do want to make an editorial correction. I'm not an attorney. I'm a lobbyist, but I do have public policy experience. But my daughter is Jordan Marie. She's 10. We only have one child, and she is truly the center of our universe. And she's spoiled. to no end, and it's something I said that I wasn't going to do. And within a year, it was clear that she was spoiled. But we love her to death. And I think my relationship with Jordan is really based upon the relationship that my dad had with my 4 older sisters. We lost our father when we were very young. I was 12 years old. My dad passed away at age 48 and left behind 4 girls. One was 15, one was 16, one was 19, and one was 21. Now, my dad was an old school dad. So my dad was one of these cats who never showed any emotion, was the ruler of the house, and when Dad spoke, that was it. There was no debate. He set the rules. So upon his sickness, it became clear to me that things were changing in our house. And I think the day that it hit me about the important role of being a father was the fact that my oldest sister was getting married, and my father was battling cancer, and was really working hard to try to make her wedding, to walk her down the aisle. And it became clear close to the wedding that he wasn't going to be able to make it. So they took pictures in our house with my oldest sister and her dad. This is the first child, his first child. Got to the wedding date and he couldn't be there, and they arranged at the hospital that the entire wedding party could go up to the hospital after the ceremony, and they had a private room so my father could see his daughter in her wedding gown. Now, my father didn't shed tears over anything. This is a man who had an accident on the job and put a drill through his leg and yanked out the drill bit and put a towel around and kept working. Never went to see the doctor. But the sight of seeing his firstborn, when he was wheeled into that hospital room in a wheelchair, he broke down in tears. And it was at that moment I understood what a father really meant, particularly to my sisters. So when my daughter was born, my relationship is conditioned upon what I saw my dad do in that household in terms of making sure that his little girls were okay. So for me, Jordan, people tease me because I'm the classic overbearing dad. My daughter can't get 2 steps out of my sight, literally. And people tease me all the time. They say, one day you're going to have to let her go. I say, yeah, but she's 10, and I still have about 7 or 8 more years before she leaves my house. But it struck me the day that she was born, the importance and the responsibility that I had, because I was okay all through the childbirth. We were happy, and I left my wife at the hospital that morning, and my mom was there, and my oldest sister, who was a nurse, was actually in the living room with us. So I was cool. I was cool as a cucumber. It was that night when I got home, and I was sitting on my back steps, and it was a beautiful night, and I thought about my dad, and I lost it because I realized I'm the dad now. And I have to find a way to make sure that my sisters who were okay, that my daughter is okay too. And my sisters struggled. Some of them did struggle. I had one sister who had a child out of wedlock, and I honestly believe that is because Dad wasn't there. Because I think if my dad was there, it would have made all the difference in the world. And she's done fine, and her kids are beautiful. But I understand the role of a father in the household. So I take that lesson very seriously.
And one of the things we want to get to, and I bring this as we get ready to hear Patty's story, is I know that she has had throughout her life a very close relationship with Quincy Jones. And one of the things that we have to realize is if you sit here and you don't have a daughter, we are still responsible for our community. This whole notion of the village raising the child, and it was co-opted by the right, and they said, oh, that's, simplistic. That no, it never has been in our community. So as you sit here, and even if you are an empty nester, you can still be very valuable to a young lady, because as we look at the issues that young women have today, we look at the issues we fight in our community with misogynistic lyrics and images and the like, and the hypocrisy, frankly, and I include myself in this, that men have, in that what we want on one end and what we don't want our daughters to deal with or our mamas to deal with. And it's difficult sometimes to resign yourself to the fact that, particularly as you get older, what am I saying and thinking over here, and what am I trying to teach over here? So as soon as we get to Patty's story, we'll be getting into all of that. So all y'all hypocritical brothers, I'll stay first. Line up in back of me. All right, I'm first in line. No, I admit it. All right, Patty.
Boy, you give me something very interesting to follow. Well, I'm going to start kind of from the back end of the story, I'll start with Quincy. Quincy's my godfather, and my dad passed away 11 years ago now. And Quincy stepped in just brilliantly and helped to fill that void for me. My mother passed away 4 years ago, and Quincy was there yet again. So I've lost both my parents. So at this point, Quincy really is my surrogate parent, and he does a darn good job. And just because I'm 58 doesn't mean I don't still need a parent of some kind. I think a lot of us tend to think that when you get older, you don't need your parents anymore. You never stop needing your parents. It never goes away. So for you guys who have young children and think that this is going to stop at some point, Anyway, so that's that part of the story. My dad was a jazz musician, and he played trombone. And he worked with Father Hines and Lucky Millender and Fletcher Henderson and Dinah Washington, who was my godmother and was the reason I met Quincy, and Billy Eckstein and Lena Horne. Those were some of the people that he worked with. He had been working with Father Hines, and Father Hines had to disband because big bands were going out, rock and roll was coming in, and so my dad was way down on his luck. He had moved to Harlem, and he was eating at the Y because that's where you could get a good meal cheap. And this foxy woman came out with a tray, and she was a waitress, and that was my mom. And he met her on a Monday, and they got married that Sunday. And they stayed married until death did them part. And they lived in Harlem for about, maybe 6 or 7 months, and Harlem was starting to change, and my parents decided they didn't want to raise me. They had me shortly thereafter, and they decided they didn't want to raise me in Harlem. And so they moved to a house that my mother had purchased with tip money that she had saved up as a waitress, a little summer cottage in a place called Bayshore, Long Island, which was a fishing and agricultural town. Duck farms and clam digging. That's what went on in Bayshore, Long Island. And my dad got a job at the post office, and he took the train to the post office every day, and my mom stayed home with me. But that wasn't going to work because they needed more money, and the trip was, he spent half the day on the train getting to and from work. So they decided that they were going to start a housekeeping company. And so they would go to a place called Fire Island and clean houses and open them up for the season and take care of the houses, come once a week on the ferry boat and take care of all these different houses. Their prerequisite for doing that was that they be allowed to bring me along because they did not want me to ever be with a babysitter. And I never was. So both my parents always took care of me. Always. As a matter of fact, they worked, eventually they stopped doing house cleaning, and they got a job at a place called Pilgrim State Hospital, which was the largest mental institution in the country, state-run mental institution. They worked there as attendants, and they both worked their way up through that system and became psychotherapists. During that time, they worked there for 17 years, they both worked split shifts so that one of them could always be at home with me, always. So I have had this magnificent background with incredible parents. And while my dad was home with me during the day, because when my parents started working split shifts, my dad would always practice his trombone, hoping that eventually big bands would come back. Never quite did. But while he would practice, he would always call me over and show me everything he knew. Well, he showed me so much that I actually knew how to read music before I knew how to read words, because he was always practicing, always playing music in the house. You would get up in the morning and you'd hear Stravinsky's Firebird, and then you'd hear some Big Mama Thornton, and then you'd hear a little Patsy Cline, and then there'd be some Duke Ellington and a little Stan Kenton, some Tito Puente, Celia Cruz. It was all over the map. it was all over the map. So to this day, when somebody asks me, what do I sing, I always say music. And so, and my dad taught me that music is love. And my mom taught me that love is music. And that's kind of a quick answer.
And you know what's amazing about that, and I tell people as we do this initiative, the one thing I think men get short shrift on is the nurturing factor of our input to our children. And we can see just, who knows if you become the Patty Austin we know if your father is not that kind of nurturer.
There's no way
with the
I'd be
music.
sitting here with that
Yeah.
as my nom de plume. No way.
Let me start off by this. Greg, I want to start with you. One of the interesting aspects that I want to deal with is the idea of this sense of the absentee father. Because one of the things that I am finding as I go out and do press for this, a lot of the reporters just really want to talk about that. They assume that we're all absentee. I keep saying, but it's a salute, it's this and that. And there is this idea of we're just not around. Let's be honest, too many of us are not around. I'm wondering how you see how our community sees it, because quite frankly, we saw Barack Obama suffer some slings and arrows from some corners of the African-American community, as does Mr. Cosby still, because we have seen him go out to kind of put a mirror up and say, here's the deal. How do you see that?
Well, let me put it in context first. The black male crisis that we're seeing has contributed to that in a great way. 70% of our households are without fathers, and although all of those fathers are not away from the lives of their children, I can suggest to you that many don't have any involvement with their children or daughters in particular. But let's put in context why that is, because what I don't like is to hear black men being beat up on without some sense of understanding and history as to where that comes from. We all know in most urban school districts you have failing education systems that do not prepare black men for the workforce. Then combine that with denial of equal opportunity and the reinforcement of stereotypes, which causes fear among the employers, who are principally white men. Combine all those things together and you'll see that black men have a denial of opportunity, failed education system, and quite frankly, instead of manning up, they run to the corner to this subculture and allow those who've removed the jobs and dumped the drugs and the guns in their community for them to kill themselves with, they allow them to treat them as suckers. The same guys who say, I'm not a sucker on the corner, they're played as suckers by a society which has rejected them. And let me say lastly, because some would contest that, and you might have a right to in many ways, but some would say, well, it's because they just don't want to take advantage of the opportunities that society has provided. Aside from the fact that they haven't been prepared for the workforce by the education system, I assure you that some of the nearly 50% of the black men in New York want to work. You can't tell me that nearly 50% of the black men who are unemployed, a third of the black men in Detroit who are unemployed, you can't tell me that all of them don't want to work. It's a denial of equal opportunity. But on the other hand, we've seen these obstacles, and as I advise black men, we've seen our forefathers go through these type of obstacles and worse, and they overcame them because they fought back, not with the gun. They put the guns down, picked up the Bible, picked up the books, and fought back by putting on the shoes and marching. But on the other hand, we have brothers, instead of fighting back, they run to the corner. Instead of strengthening themselves, when things get tough, they run and try and smoke their problems away or drink their problems away. And I like to tell them, as I conclude, that we can instead do just as many of the women who are here today with us. You all face the same, if not more, obstacles than our black men. Many of you work 2 to 3 jobs, and you're educating yourself, and you're raising children alone. And most of you are not on drugs or alcohol unless you're following some no-good man. And so I say, Ed, that plays a big role in the lives of ladies, because in my case, I had no father and I had no sisters. So I had no idea how to nurture and train a daughter. I had to find that out from others. I had to look to my father-in-law, quite frankly, and never knew anything of it, never saw an example until I was an adult. Until I was 20 years old, that's the first time I saw an example of a quality man who was prepared to nurture and had the knowledge to nurture and teach his daughter.
Well, Walter, I know, too, that you have done a lot of work with black unemployment and black males in New York City. Talk to me, too, about the insidious nature of men as providers, as the want, particularly for your daughter to be the strength. And when you're denied all of the things that Greg says, sometimes you can deal with your son because you just teach him, hey, you know, it's hard luck on us. But you don't want to walk to your daughter and let her see you as this cat that cannot fulfill what men are supposed to fulfill.
I tell people all the time I would not want to be a young black man in today's environment. I'm 49. And if I were 18 or 19, I'd be frightened. What you see young black men encounter on the streets in a place like New York is just undescribable. I mean, I've had young black men who are supposed to be the toughest of the tough just break down in tears when you start talking to them, because many of them do want to do the right thing, but they've been so estranged from any systems of support. And what I tell people all the time, the absentee father narrative has become a convenient narrative for the media to paint a pathology about our community. But I know for a fact that there are young black men who go into family court on child support issues who really want to pay. They just don't have the means. And they face a judge who looks at them as though they're disposable. And so they get these heavy fines put on them. They don't have the means to pay child support. And as one young man told me, he said, I'm willing to be supportive, I just don't have the financial resources to do what this court is telling me. So I think we have to take a step back sometimes and think about what these young men are facing every day. And it is an issue of pride. It is an issue of self-esteem that if they have, particularly if they have a daughter, because there's something about, I want to be seen as being able to provide for my little girl. And if I can't, for me, the quickest way out is to not be around, because I don't want to be seen as the weak brother who can't do anything for my child. So it's a very complicated picture out there.
Courtney, the other thing, and pick up on the point, but the other thing that's interesting in what you talked about and you told us in that story that your sister-in-law shared is the idea that many times, and I can't tell you, we have had, since we launched this website, thousands, and I can assure you there are men out here who will say this, and I will take a swipe at the ladies. I've been very kind. But I'm going to take a swipe now based on what we've heard. There are many women out here who are using these children as fodder to get back at these men too. So even at the end of the day, if you're not with your wife, your partner, one would want to believe, as you all said, that there would have been either a way to foster the kind of relationship that even if it ends, you walk away, not perhaps even as friends, but friendly.
You know, Miss Patty's story of her parents touched me deeply, because you have a father who the nature of his business shifted on him. Mm-hmm. Now, he could have been one of those statistics who just said, well, I'm out. Yeah. But he met someone, and because of the bond that your mother and father shared, they made a plan. They put a plan together. It didn't just happen by accident. They put a plan together. They said, I'm not going to be, somebody's going to be home with her. If we can't be home with her, one of us can't be home with her, and then she's going with us. Yeah. And we got to talk to somebody at our work to get them to be on board with our plan. That if you can't, if the nature of things shift on you, then be helpful in another way.
Absolutely.
Law and Order for me stopped. Let me just say this. I'm not on Law and Order anymore. Those are reruns you all are watching. Okay? I'm not on the show anymore. So I haven't been in a steady for 2 years. Okay? I'm at home. Okay? I'm not working. Okay? I save my money. I'm real good at saving. My wife and I are real good at saving our money. Okay?
All right.
And Mommy tells me all the time, Dad, you need to get a job. I say, okay, the job is coming, okay? So I have got to be helpful in other ways. All right, so I'm with the babies. I'm organizing the household. I'm moving us from one house to another house. You always can't be the main breadwinner. I was the main breadwinner for 5 years when I was on the show. So put your pride in your pocket and figure out another way to add to the family, because the main thing is that the family moves forward. That's the main thing. Not so much that, the world is hard and I can't do what I see in my mind right now, but that but is real powerful. You don't know what's in store down the line, and I let God take care of that, and I do my part. I got a part to play, and my children are watching me. And they don't know that Daddy's not at work right now. They just know that Daddy's here, and that we are a family. Mommy's going to work, right? Mommy's going to work right now. Daddy's here right now. Right. So we're putting the children are watching, and they're getting things together in their minds. They're trying to understand things. And if I step out and I'm moody and just mad at Mommy and mad at Daddy mad. I don't want to be around Daddy mad. Mommy, why Daddy mad? There's a whole dialogue that happens around Daddy mad.
Yeah.
And then we get into Daddy not working, and Daddy not working, Daddy mad. So I understand all of we all understand it, but the fact of the matter is the family still got to go forward, and things change. That story for me, that is the seminal story that something happened. The world shifted as the world is shifting now.
Yeah. And I have to say, I just have to interrupt for a second.
Please interrupt me, because I don't know when I was going to stop.
As it was shifting, as it was shifting, I was never aware of the shift. Exactly. I didn't realize that my parents were dirt poor until I turned about 30. It dawned on me one day. Now I told you they worked at Pilgrim State Hospital. They would bring home state cheese. They would pull dandelion greens out the backyard, which now go for about $10 a pound, by the way. Right. My mother could make a meal out of chewing gum, Both my parents cooked. They would get in the kitchen and they would cook together. When I started doing TV when I was 5 years old. I started doing a TV show in New York City. By that time, my parents were able to purchase a car, so we would drive into the city. We would never go to a restaurant because my parents couldn't afford a restaurant. So they would make a picnic basket full of food, and we would eat in Central Park. I thought we owned Central Park. I didn't know any better, And I would go do my little thing on my TV show, and we'd drive back home. And I'd go to public school, and my parents were just amazing. Amazing creative people, tremendously creative in their poverty, creative in their middle-classness. They had a garage that was off from the house. My mother got outside with a can of white paint, painted the room white, and said, "This is your room." She put up a little chalkboard and put my dolls in the room and some chairs. And my dad bought me a little record player from somebody up the street and bought their record collection. Happened to be all Broadway show tunes. And I would be there when I wasn't hanging with my dad while he was playing his trombone, that's where I was hanging, listening to Broadway show tunes, thinking I was Stubby K and Guys and Dolls for a long time. So, yeah.
Let me do this, because
Profound.
then I want to come to you, Patty, and ask you something about women and the images that we see and how men need to be involved in that too. But I would ask those of you who have questions to start making your way to the microphone. If you see 3 or 4 people in line, keep your seat. Let some of that die down before we go. Patty, one of the things I wanted to follow up with you about, you have been in this industry a mighty long time, and those of us who are in it, Greg and I talk about this all the time, understand the importance of imagery and what it means to who we are. Because think of this, folks. When you think about what is in your life, often you learn that from the media. I say all the time, when you think about, and when you're trying to be romantic, you think about not necessarily what most of us learned at home. Mom and Daddy weren't sitting there with candlelit dinner. You saw whether it was Doris Day and Rock Hudson or Billy D. Williams and Diana Ross. We're taught often how to live our lives through the media. So talk to me, if you will, Patty, about how we can combat this sense of what young black women in particular are being taught and how men in particular. I just did an interview with LL Cool J, and it was so telling because I said, LL, what if your daughter comes home, she's 18, and says, Daddy, I just got a role in a video, but I got to wear a G-string and a skimpy top. What do you tell her?
Bye-bye.
And it was interesting because he said, and I asked the same thing of Ludacris, and LL said, I don't want to sound hypocritical. He said, but there are 2 things I will tell you. I am 40, whatever he is now. He said, I have never done anything in my career that I'm embarrassed for. But I know in my early 20s in particular when I started, I had skimpy clad women and all of the videos I did, et cetera, et cetera. He said, now, I can conversely tell you some of them went on to be actresses and we gave them opportunity. But I know what you're asking. And this is what he said, and he was being very honest. He said most of the women who came to those video shoots, you could tell immediately, no daddy in their life, no man, because they were willing to do almost anything, and in some cases anything, to get in that video. And so he said, I would tell you, I'll clean up the word. He said, hell no. He said a little stronger, but we won't go into what he actually said. But he said, that's what I would tell my daughter. Not that I didn't have them in mind, but that's what I would tell. So talk to me about what you have seen over the years and how you believe that men need to play a role, whether in terms of fathers or taking the front to say, we've crossed the line.
Yeah. It's really simple. You learn how you are to be treated as a woman by the way you see your father treat your mama. And just because your daddy is at home doesn't necessarily mean your daddy is at home. So you can be absentee and be there, which is probably worse than if you're not there at all. You know, not everybody is on their job. You know, not all people. There are a lot of people who have horrible parenting skills. We live in a culture that no one ever teaches anybody about parenting. In Japan, when you're in kindergarten, you have a course called parenting. They teach Japanese children how to parent. Look at Japan. You know, I travel all over the world. And you see it's all about family. It's all about having that connection. So it's all about setting an example. You know, people say to me, who's your hero? I said, my father, because that's the guy I know. I don't know any of these other people.
Yeah, and Greg, you should know, before we go to the road here, you should know, you see many of those young women who quite frankly come to your courtroom. And you have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis in terms of not only the sexual situation that these images bring to bear, but now we see the growth of crime among young women as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we're approaching a phase where we see almost as many black women going into the prison industrial complex as we do black men. And much of it is because they've gotten involved in that subculture of crime and drugs, which also includes the strip clubs. It's really, they feed off of each other. You go to the strip club and you dance. The drug dealers are the primary guys at the strip clubs who have the money. The drug dealers, once they become involved with the stripper. They ask the stripper to carry their drugs from city to city. They get caught and they do a life. They get ordered to do life because they have carried 5 or 10 kilos of cocaine. The drug dealer who put it in their pocket to carry it, for all intents and purposes, he gets probation, if anything at all. And so that's one of the things that we're facing now that is more rapidly becoming a crisis as well.
And one of the things that we see is you talk about the growing numbers of young women involved in that trade and the problem of incarceration. We also salute and see young black women doing masterful jobs in corporate America and the like. And often you can see the correlation between no father and a father. So that is huge if you don't believe that there is a correlation to success. And again, it doesn't have to be the biological father. We are asking all of us to stand up and say to the man next to you, brother, are we collectively, no finger pointing, doing the right thing? That's what we have to start asking ourselves, because at the end of the day, black women have kept this community afloat for a mighty, mighty long time. Let me start with you. Yes, ma'am. And should I note that and I was told that the congressman was voting, I believe, at the time of our start of our session, but the congressman has joined us. Congressman Meeks, thank you so much for being with us. Greatly appreciate it.
What's happening to my money, man?
Exactly.
What's happening to my money? You're killing me, Meeks. You're killing me.
Look, I can't even say 700 billion. I can't even say that, so I wasn't even going to ask that. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, and I'm really excited to be here for this conversation. My name is Janice Farabee. I'm the founder and CEO of Farabee Enterprises International and author of Got It Going On, Self-Esteem, Empowerment Books and Curriculum for Adolescent Girls of Color, and the director of the Bethune Program Development Center for the National Council of Negro Women and creator of the Global Girls Program with 30 years of experience in social and emotional development for girls around the world. First, I want to again say thank you for being here to address this important topic. And my question is really to Ed Gordon. How can I and others like me who work with girls work with you to help promote this issue in our community and to help our girls develop a healthy sense of self?
Let me say one of the things, and I thank you for that, and we're looking for that. I will tell you, literally, we grew this program with the help of Carol Johnson Green, who's along that wall. Carol, please raise your hand. With Leslie Bardo, who's from Burrell Advertising, and Toya Evans, who's in the front row. Would you all stand really seriously, please? Literally, within 3 months, we had a website up, because Doris was cracking that whip to say, we need that website, we need that website. All of this has come so very quickly. So what we are envisioning and hoping to do with the help of others is on the website, we also want to give people places that they can go, like your organizations. So I would ask you to go on to the website, leave us that information, and as we grow as a staff, we'll be contacting people. The one thing that I've been careful about is trying to grow this slowly. I've seen too many initiatives come out banging, and then you never hear from them again. You never see them again because they tried to do everything within a day. But I would ask that you just simply go on daddyspromise.com, tell us you met us here, you'd love to work with us, and sooner than later, we hope, we'll be able to staff that and bring to the website as a clearinghouse, if you will, because there's so many people who have questions, want to know what they can do, where they can go, and we'll have that if nothing else. So I think
fatherhood is learned. You learn it from your father, you learn it from your grandfather, so on and so on and so on. But I get mad and I get hurt when I hear black men and women in the news media talking about black men as fathers and not being there. I hate it and I get mad because they don't understand that fatherhood is learned, and so is motherhood. Now, you wouldn't blame the slaves during the 2 eras of slavery in our country. You wouldn't blame them for being in slavery. But at the same time, I hear black fathers and black men and the media talk about black fathers like a dog.
and can't understand that they didn't have the opportunity to learn fatherhood from their fathers, and mothers to learn motherhood from their mothers. There's one reason.
All right, Doctor, I got to get you to a question if you have
Okay,
it.
here's the question. Thank you. What are our Congress members doing to promote fatherhood through legislation?
All right. Well, here you go. Gentlemen, cut this song. We just happen to have a congressman here with us. And let me ask you, let me follow up if you don't mind in taking that, whether or not it's fair to assume that Congress can legislate fatherhood. So let me throw that out as well. Can you guys cut the wireless on?
My good friend Congressman ALC Hastings say we can't. He says that we can't legislate morals and character, and as we talk about this bailout discussion, I ran into Dr. Proctor from Tallahassee, Florida, as I was walking through the hall, coming into this room, and he said, "Kendrick, I need $200 billion to bail out the black male." There you go. Oh. You know, if anybody needs help and assistance, I need that. So you can go back and file an amendment and ask for that first. So I hear what you're saying, and the reason why we're here is to be able to have the kind of discussion that we need to have so that folks can disperse and go back to their corner of the world and have the same kind of forward lean that you have into that mic. You're my frat brother, so I felt like I was at a frat meeting, and you were there, asking a question or making a statement. We're going to put you on the panel here in a minute, but let me just say this very quickly. Seriously, there is a crisis, and we are trying to do the things not only through the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, which we're doing here today, and with Ed and the campaign is doing throughout the country. We want to partner with that, but we also have to be strong examples as leaders. I'm a father, and it's very difficult because you come up in this atmosphere, you know what the drill is. And many times, because you deal with so many different people, but every day during this conference, yesterday I drove my son to school, I drove my daughter to school. The real issue is that they have to see me do that in the midst of all of this and be able to put it on pause. Phone ring, policy, ambassador, whoever it is, I have to answer this phone. This is my daughter calling. So we have to give them that kind of example. And then the CBC is full of fathers and full of mothers who are looking for better fathers. And so we do have a lot of issues that are out there, but we cannot legislate a brother, white or black, to be a better father. It's hard for us to do that, but we try to set the environment for it. So it is a very good question, but we just can't legislate it. And I don't know of anyone that has a bill that's saying this bill is going to make fatherhood even a bigger thing within a family's life.
I agree with you.
I answered the question because you got folks lining behind you there.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. God bless you.
He still got that honey sugar thing.
I used to be the boss of the queue, so I know how to. Thank you, bro. Appreciate you.
One of the things I'll say, and I'm going to alternate between microphones, but one of the things I'll say is, one of the things that we have to do as black men, though, is accept the idea of all of the things that befall us in our community, but no longer accept it as a holding point for us. Too often we've said this, that, and the other, and we've been stuck on stupid for a little while. And so now it's on us to say, okay, just like they changed the rules, we laugh about the $700 billion, but you saw people who stopped in the middle of the game and said, we're going to change the rules. So as black men, we need to take note of that. Stop in the middle of this game and tell each other, you know what? We're going to change the rules. And that's what we're going to do. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Chantel Shackelford. I've just been aware of the Daddy's Promise initiative since our annual 100 Black Men's Annual Conference this June. And since then, I've had a lot of conversations with adult women, adult daughters. And I ask this question on behalf of them. What happens when a father-daughter relationship is affected, experiences trauma, and there's extenuous hurt in childhood, and that child grows up as an adult and experiences male relationships, but there's still that scar. So what happens to that daughter? How can, I guess, the fathers in their, as these relationships grow, repair those relationships and help that daughter to progress to have healthy relationships?
I think one of the forgiveness is the key. The father's got to come to, is it you? Is it you?
Yeah.
He's got to come to you and apologize to begin. I mean, you've got to begin somewhere. And it's not on you to apologize to him. It's on him to apologize to you for whatever the hurt was, whether it be not for him not being there. I mean, that's huge. But to come to you as a man, because that's one of the things that my wife and I strive, and as the head of the household, I said, be the head of the household and saying, I'm sorry. Be the head of the household and say, that I made a mistake. Can we start again, and I'll try better next time. And it's at that point that you can begin to go, okay, that's a good place to start, and you can grow from there. If he doesn't come and apologizes, there's no place to start.
Well, and can I also interject something? He might not come. And we don't do this enough, but you need to go and get some therapy. Yeah. We don't do therapy, and we need therapy. As a people, we need therapy.
Amen.
We've got a lot of issues that we need to deal with, and we don't deal with it. So Papa might not come. God bless the child that has his own.
Let me also say this. We have received a couple of emails, and a man stopped me who said, hey, I heard about your initiative. I've not talked to my daughter in 10 years. He said, and I read about the initiative. I went on the website, and when I saw those pictures, the ones I'm asking you all to go look at, he said, when I saw those pictures of those black men with the daughters, he said, I want to call my daughter. What do you think I should do? I said, well, the first thing is you should call her. That's the first thing. But I also say this to you. As Patty said, if he doesn't come, I think if you really want it, then you make the overture first. But here's what you do in that situation, because we're talking about this a lot with people. As Patty said, expect that he may not. But at least you know. You won't have to go to your grave thinking, I wish I had at least reached out to him. Because sometimes, just like that man, he knew that he hurt his daughter, and he was almost too ashamed to reach out to her. So give it an attempt, but with some armor on, so if he does not come, accept that, okay, I tried, and then hopefully, whether it's an uncle, a neighbor, some older man who you trust and love, that they can feel, no one will ever be your father, but at least start to quench some of that thirst that's there. But if he won't come, try it once. All right? Yes, sir.
Thank you for your comment. I just want to add to that. I'm 27 years old, the product of a single-parent household. My sister and I were raised by a strong black woman. Her name is Jackie, born Jacqueline. 2 years ago, my dad almost died. And at that moment, I was able to enlist the transformative power of forgiveness. And now, for the first time, my dad says, I love you.
Amen.
First time. So we've had the better 2 years than we had the first 25 years. And it took me doing what you were saying. I had to go to him and say, Dad, you may not know how to forgive. So as your son, I'm going to forgive you of the last 27 years, and we're going to start over. My dad calls me every morning at 6 a.m. Boy, get to work. That's what he says. So I agree with you. I agree with you. I could not walk past without coming in because I have a sister who's 22. She wished me a happy Father's Day this year, even though we're reconciled with our dad. She said, you raised me. So I thank you for that.
Wow.
So the reason I had to come ask my question is that I really believe in the power of surrogate fatherhood. But I know that iron sharpens iron. Something that has to be said at this panel is that men, we have to keep ourselves in check. Because when a woman comes to us in that manner, we have to check ourselves beyond society's push for men to be men and do what they do. You know what I mean? That we're respectful and responsible with the care and concern that someone comes to us with. So my question for the panel is, how do you recommend to black men of all age groups, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, I'm in my 20s, and I consider myself a surrogate dad for people, even though I have no children. How do you recommend that we, in good faith, serve that role respectfully with dignity, with character? And then how do we hold each other accountable as men to other men to hold that way and be that way in the relationships they have with young women?
Well, let me say this. It's interesting that we would get on the topic of forgiveness. I am in my 40s, and the last time I saw my father, I was age 14. My mother sent me to live with him over the summer to try and straighten me out, and went over to the other side of town, and he was a hustler too, and put me further into the game. And so she came within a month or two to pick me up, and I never saw or heard from him again. And as we speak, I haven't forgiven him. And so it's interesting that we hear the theme of forgiveness, because I'm learning, quite frankly. And so to say that, in that regard, I think that it is important that we spread that message around more, because a lot of young men have the rage and the anger in them because they haven't forgiven their father. They haven't gotten past it. You know, I struggle with forgiveness, period, and probably because of my childhood upbringing. But so that's a message that we need to spread more, and we thank you for bringing that, and I thank you as well.
Well, you know, I'm the product of surrogate fatherhood. When I lost my dad at age 12, there were black men who stepped in and substituted in that role. And I tell people the story all the time that when I went away to college at age 18, I used to play basketball. I was on a high school basketball team, and there was a group of black men I used to play basketball with. And they made it clear when I went away to college that when I came home, I was not allowed to step onto the court unless I showed them my transcript. That was their condition. And I thought they were kidding around when they said that. And I came home one summer, and I had my ball, and I went out on the court, and one of them grabbed my ball and said, "Sit down. We want to see your grades." And I think so for many of us, we need to understand that even if you don't have a child, there is a real role that you can play. And I wouldn't be here today had not men in my church, men in my neighborhood, neighbors, my godfather, who they all saw me and said, "We know that this kid will be lost. His mom has 4 girls, and I have a younger brother." And it was like, how do you hold a family together? Well, we did it because men stepped in. And the message to me was clear, was your father may no longer be on this earth, but we'll be damned if we lose you. And they were clear. They said, "We know your father, we knew your father, and we will exact the same punishment on you." And my mother was clear that, you know something? They'll take care. Well, they'll do whatever they need to do to keep this boy in check. And I think that's an important role that we need to understand.
Please also understand, and thank you for your question, the importance you have, even if you have a young woman around you who has a father in her life. I showed Carol to you. Our daughters are best friends. And Carol and her husband are very involved in her daughter's life on an everyday basis. One day Carol was driving with Samantha, her daughter, and Samantha says, "Mommy, who would take care of me if something happened to you or Daddy?" And she said, "Oh, your sister, my sister, blah, blah, blah." And she tried to explain the legal ramifications of what happens when that occurs. And she said, "Oh, okay, why do you ask?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know, Mommy." And Carol wouldn't let it go, and she finally said, "Well, why?" She said, "I was just wondering." And so Carol said, "Well, who would you want to take care of you?" And she said, "Mr. Gore." That's what she calls me. And Samantha and I have always had a special relationship, but here's a young lady who has a father in her life. He does everything he's supposed to do, but yet and still, there are other men who involve themselves in your life who can be impactful. And the fact that she said that meant so much to me, because I, like you, am involved with all of Taylor's little friends, and they all sleep in my house in the summer. I swear to God, I try to leave a room. I say, I am not 14. I'm not playing with y'all anymore. But the point is, you can be impactful even if that child has a man in her life, because we do not do it alone. Our parents don't always have the wisdom that we assume they have. Sometimes I've gotten good advice counter to some of the things that my relatives have told me from others who, after you process, you understand that I do need to follow this road this time. So please understand the importance of men in the lives of children, and fathers to daughters, males to females. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The sister before me actually asked my question, and I was going to sit down, but I wanted to first thank you, because this is...
Oh, it's all right, baby. It's all right.
To look around in this room, it is an honor It is a true honor to sit in the presence of these... Excuse me.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's all right. You know how black folks are. When we start crying, we say, it's all right, baby. It's all right. It's all right, baby. Do your thing.
I'm feeling you. It's okay.